and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Welcome, New Orleans, and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we talk a lot about the home teams, the Saints, LSU, and Tulane. We'll sprinkle in some Southeastern, some Nicholls State. If we got some time, we'll talk a little high school as well. Great panel for you, as always. Tonight on the show, Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com, Andrew Doak of WWL Channel 4 Television Sports. Gentlemen, welcome to the show as always. Thanks so much for coming down. Jude, we like to always start off telling folks about what you're involved in, and while you're involved in a lot. Tell the folks about it.
Very busy indeed, of course, during football season at CrescentCitySports.com. And we have lots of live games, the best scoreboard in Louisiana high school football. That keeps us busy on the weekends. We have 2 games streaming live this weekend, as a matter of fact, on Crescent City Sports, along with that Friday night scoreboard show connected with Ken Trahan's Original Prep Football Report. I keep myself busy with a couple nights a week of radio, hosting the Jude Young Show on WGSO 990 AM at 6 o'clock. When basketball season rolls around, I have to make time because I'm the voice of the UNO Privateers men's basketball team. Another season is right around the corner. So busy, but enjoying it. That's what we're in this business for, Eric.
Right. No doubt about it. Andrew, welcome back. I was telling you before the show, man, you gave me some great stats this week. Did a great job on 4th Down on 4. Tell the folks about 4th Down on 4 and things you guys are covering over Channel 4.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, look, with football season right now, it is the crazy time with Saints, LSU going to Auburn this weekend, high school football on Friday night. I'll actually be headed to Auburn this weekend for the LSU game. Hopefully we see a little bit more offensive creativity. Please. I think we will. But, look, we're always trying to put together a better product over on Channel 4. 4th Down on 4 on Sunday nights lets us really be able to dig into sports at a deeper level. And you can follow me at Andrew Doak _WWL and Andrew Doak WWL on Facebook as well. And trying to bring you the best stuff we can.
Yeah, you're doing, and also high school football, right?
Yeah, high school football. I believe Doug Mouton is going to be out at Destrehan and John Ehret this week on Friday night. Don't hold me to that, but I believe that's where he headed.
Great job as always.
Yeah, you got it.
Let's start with the Saints, unfortunately. Losers to Tampa Bay 48-40. They're 0-1. They're 0-1 in the division. They're 0-1 in the conference. That's the thing that really got me more than anything else. This is a game in which they should have been prepared for all off-season long. It's a team that beat them in the last game of the season last year when they really kind of needed that game to win the division. Of course, some other things happen, and they end up being the division winner anyway. Also, a little bit for seeding as well. They didn't get it done last year at Raymond James. They didn't get it done in the Dome on Sunday. But going back and watching the game again, for those of you that listen to the radio show, I saw a much different game than maybe I saw seeing it live. And I saw a team that got out physical. I saw a team that got beat on both sides of the lines. I saw receivers that out physicaled cornerbacks. Again, Mike Evans just abused Marshawn Lattimore. Linebackers that weren't hitting their gaps, that looked confused at times. This modge podge of mixing linebackers. It doesn't look like guys didn't know where they're going to be or what their assignments are. On offense, the offensive line, again, you first glance, you look at the offensive line and you say, wow, so they put 40 points on the board. They play well. No, Breeze made a lot of time with his feet. And of course, Kamara made a lot of yards after contact. It was not a great performance for this team on Sunday, despite being only losing by 8. And so there's a level of frustration because much is expected this season from this team, especially when you start talking about Super Bowl contender. And defensively, they did not show up on Sunday at all. They got out physical. I thought it was overconfidence. No, they got out physical on Sunday. Let's hear what our experts have to say. Your thoughts on Sunday?
Well, Eric, I think you hit the nail on the head about the importance of the physical part of the game. In a track meet, you can lose that sometimes. And I saw it on Sunday from our perch at the top of the dome of the press box. You could see the losing not only at the line of scrimmage, but when you saw the free releases of the receivers, really an example of it that kind of is a microcosm of what we saw in the preseason leading into the regular season was Marshawn Lattimore. He wasn't physical. He looked like he was going half speed when he was on the field with the first team defense in games that didn't mean anything. But he didn't bring it to the table, as you mentioned, against Mike Evans, who those two had quite a couple of issues in the game in the Dome last season. And Tampa Bay got their revenge at the end of the regular season. I think the Saints players forgot about that, even though they talked about being a more mature team. You pretty much brought the core back of that defense, but they forgot getting beaten physically and up and down the field at Tampa at the end of the regular season because of those two epic playoff games.
Right.
Short memories.
Right.
Instead of thinking about revenge, and you read your press clippings, not only yours, but about Tampa Bay. I think the media got it wrong, calling the Buccaneers the worst team in the NFC. There's several that are going to be worse than a team that has talent, but you wondered about the direction. Ryan Fitzpatrick provided direction, didn't he? He was outstanding, and the Saints need to wake up very quickly. It's inexcusable. It's a disgrace how they performed in that game at home. 10-point favorites in the NFL at home that are supposed to be Super Bowl contenders aren't supposed to lose, especially when they score 40 points. I think they'll bring it against Cleveland, but that's not going to take away the bitter taste of what this game could cost them down the line, even if they do play themselves into contention.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Andrew, your synopsis.
They gave the Saints secondary fits, and I think it's kind of twofold to look at this. Look, the defensive line didn't get much pressure, but also the secondary struggled as well. One stat that stood out to me was in time to throw, according to Next Gen Stats, Ryan Fitzpatrick in games played through Sunday was 7th in the NFL from the time of the snap to the release of the football. It was 2.56 seconds. That was faster than Tom Brady or Drew Brees. I mean, he was getting the ball out quickly. But the other thing that really is a red flag for the Saints defense, they only gave up one touchdown of more than 50 yards last year. They gave up two against Tampa Bay in week 1. Deshaun Jackson and Mike Evans, both Crawley and Lattimore had really bad moments during that game. And it looked like the whole secondary, there was some instances where it looked like they had handoffs. They didn't know who they were handing players off to, like who was the second tier of the coverage within the secondary. So that was something that really raised a couple red flags. Your hope is, though, that they're able to bounce back this week, and that was a wake-up call. But I don't really think you're going to know whether or not this was a wake-up call until you get to week 3 or 4, and then you could look back and say, yeah, this was a wake-up call. Or the bad part of it could be, no, this is really indicative of how the season could end up going for this defense. I think it's the former rather than the latter. But to get punched in the mouth and not make adjustments and not see that wake-up call during the game is the frustrating thing.
That really is, because look, I get, and I bought into overconfidence early. I'm thinking myself, this team is just overconfident. But as an athlete, you can go into a game overconfident. You go into any type of sporting event overconfident. But once you get punched in the mouth, normally you rebound and say, okay, this is for real now, and you can raise the level of your play. They didn't. They did not raise the level of their play. In fact, they looked confused at times. And more importantly, they got beat almost at every aspect of the game on all 3 levels, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
There's no question that they were beaten soundly and didn't respond. You didn't even see any anger on the field until about the 3rd quarter when Tyler Davison got that personal foul penalty. And he was one of the biggest culprits of somebody who just played miserably up front. He's supposed to be the nose. He's supposed to take up blockers and create some push. He wasn't doing any of that. And we still don't know whether either Sheldon Rankins or David Onyemata are going to be impact players on a regular basis as defensive tackles who can provide penetration, make plays behind the line of scrimmage. But we know that those combinations just didn't work this week. Davison's one of those players who appears to be injured and isn't going to play, and that might be addition by subtraction. He played so poorly, it really stood out. but he wasn't alone. Back to your point about playing much more physically going forward. Cleveland's a more physical football team. They're built that way. They have power running backs that you're going to have to deal with. Carlos Hyde, along with the rookie Nick Chubb. They're going to play a different style of game because Tyrod Taylor's the quarterback. He's not an impact type of guy if you ask him to sling it around the yard for 60 minutes. But when it comes down to it, it's what Marcus Davenport said about he, as a rookie, needed to play more violent. The whole team does. They simply have to be more physical, and if they aren't against Cleveland, their big weakness, we thought going into the season, was if teams decided to line up, bring extra tight ends on the field and run it at them. I don't think Cleveland's going to see the film of Tampa Bay and think they can replicate that often. They're going to try to run the ball, set up play action, go deep to a Josh Gordon, for example, if available, because he is a threat that way. Move the chains with Jarvis Landry, very good young tight end, David Njoku. All those pieces that if they run the ball, they could dominate time of possession and keep the Saints offense off the field. It's a different kind of challenge, and it's going to require even more of a physical style than what the Saints needed to even stay on the field with the Bucs.
Andrew, your thoughts?
One other interesting part about the Saints defense was that they really neutralized Cam Jordan. And we actually asked Teron Armstead after the game what he saw, and he gave us a little bit of insight. And they were bringing tight ends in. They had running backs who were chipping him at every moment. And there weren't many times that he wasn't double-teamed or sometimes triple-teamed. You didn't hear his name other than for a batted pass at the line that I can remember, I think, in the first or second quarter. Other than that, you didn't hear his name in the building. So you're going to have to look at teams doing that moving forward, and that's going to put more on Marcus Davenport's plate, and as well as Tyler Davison, David Onyemata, and Sheldon Rankins. Those guys, that was a question mark for me, too, going into the season, is up the middle. Are you going to be able to have interior defensive linemen who are going to stop the run? In that first half, Tampa Bay was running the ball and at ease. They were getting gashed on the ground, and then finally, they just started rolling offensively through the air, and they just kind of stuck with that. So it took that weakness, at least from being present from the defense away a little bit. But I look, there were so many things that went wrong defensively for the Saints team that their answer was everything in the locker room. They couldn't even pinpoint one thing. So they could have broken it down at a more elementary level for everybody to understand, but there was just so much to break down. I think you just almost walk away burning the tape from this game because you couldn't have asked for a worse performance to start the season.
I don't know if I'd burn it. I might want to make them sit through it and watch that horror show again. I had to watch it a second time, so I make them watch it quite a few times. I wouldn't want to be in that film room with that breaking that down, because I'm sure coaches were very, very upset about what they saw. I can tell you what I saw. I saw a defensive line that did not penetrate Tampa Bay's offensive line. Again, you want to see a defensive line reset the line of scrimmage, and this defensive line did not do that. We thought, as you mentioned, that we're going to have some problems stopping the run. But the thing that really shocked everybody was the inability to stop the pass, and not so much, again, the putting of pressure on Fitzpatrick, but wide receivers running free or out physicaling the cornerbacks, safeties that either weren't safeties, making sure that players don't get behind them, or taking bad angles. That was the most surprising thing to me, was the play of the secondary.
Right, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, a good young receiver, Deshaun Jackson, we know about him in the slot. That's a pretty good trio, but the Saints made it easy on them because they weren't providing the pressure. Even when they did have good coverage initially, those first few seconds after the snap, you weren't seeing integrity in the pass rush lanes. Not only you're not getting there, but you're letting Ryan Fitzpatrick move around at will to buy more time. And I believe that's going to improve, but I think the Saints have to figure out exactly what they're going to do with their personnel, because most of the time they would like to have 5 DBs on the field. It's a matter of who those DBs are going to be. Von Bell is such a liability in coverage. His mistake responsible for the first touchdown of the game for Tampa. Those handoffs that you mentioned, that will get better with time, because Kurt Coleman, I think, as a veteran, will get better at understanding what he needs to do and having those communication lines taken care of before games, working with a Marcus Williams in particular. But I I think you're going to see a more physical style of play. Ken Crawley can't make it in the NFL if he's not more physical than he was this past Sunday. I think he was resting on his laurels.
But that was a problem
bit.
last year, though, with his physicality.
Yeah, but he might get flags. It's
Right.
a lot different getting
Right.
flags than giving up those explosive plays
Absolutely.
that we didn't see before. And there's no question that Lattimore's going to have to be more physical as well, because the one thing you do notice about him is he's a slight-built cornerback.
Yes.
So physical play, being able to at least somewhat disrupt receivers off the line of scrimmage, those first 5 yards when you can make contact, he's going to have to do that more often against a guy like Mike Evans one week, and then you have to deal with Jarvis Landry, who's as physical as it gets and a great short to intermediate route runner who moves the chains. So they're going to have to step up and show that right away, and they might be put on an island if the Saints are forced to dedicate more resources to stop a Cleveland team that you know is going to be looking to run the football between the tackles.
What did you see in the secondary?
A lot of confusion. A lot of confusion. And, I think when it came to Von Bell, he was the first mistake maker that I felt like popped out to me when, there was a handoff that looked like Patrick Robinson was supposed to hand him off to Von Bell, and he just let Deshaun Jackson run right past him. Then all of a sudden you see Marcus Williams coming into the frame. It looked like he was just trying to chase down the mistake, basically. By that point, obviously, it was too late. But the secondary and the defensive line, it's twofold. I mean, they work together. And I think when it came to the defensive line of the Saints, from what I took from the postgame, it sounded like they thought that Ryan Fitzpatrick was going to run more up the middle whenever he got loose. And he busted out outside the tackles. The frustrating thing, too, though, is that you would have thought the Saints would have adjusted to that, because that 3rd and 11 to ice the game, essentially, where did he go? He went to the left side outside the tackle, and you didn't adjust to it the whole game. So I think for all of these players, you saw a lot of rotation, especially with the linebackers, and you saw it in the secondary, too, where they went to Kurt Coleman, which I was surprised that we didn't see him a little bit more. I guess Von Bell's taking the primary role in that job. We'll see if that changes this week, because I think all these jobs are going to be pretty much up for grabs with who they have in the building and who they might be able to bring outside. But, I mean, look, the only way I know how to put it is just a disappointing performance all the way around for this defense.
Yeah, and look, the defense for sure. Offensively, there were some really good things that happened, though. I mean, you talk about, Drew Brees, 37 of 45, 439, 3 touchdowns. I mean, he was magnificent. Kamara, eight rushes, 29 yards. As I mentioned, most of those on his own. Yak yards after contact, 9 catches, 112 yards, 1 touchdown, and of course Thomas with a historic day for a Saints receiver. 16 of 17, 17 targets, 16 catches, 180 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 fumble. The fumble, obviously a big play, but wow. I mean, again, those 3 played really well.
Right, you have that triplets combination that you hear about that can be dominant in the NFL, and they all were on Sunday. And we know Drew Brees never rests on his laurels, always working hard to, at this point, prolong his greatness in his career. But Alvin Kamara in the offseason took his game to another level. Mike Thomas, we know he's dominated in practices. He's now dominating in games. And the pieces are there with an offensive line that, if it can stay healthy, we'll have to see about that. A little banged up this week. This offense is going to be prolific, but you don't want them having to play like so many Sean Payton years that wound up being around 500 at the end record-wise, having to play in shootouts, having to play catch-up. And when it comes down to it, they'll be able to pound it out a little bit more in games where they're not constantly chasing the scoreboard when they get Mark Ingram back. But there were mistakes not only by what we saw physicality-wise and issues all over the defense, but you really have to question the decision that Sean Payton made not to go with a guy who had been in camp with Jonathan Williams and that big fumble by Mike Gillislee. You're going with a veteran that you believe you can trust, but maybe you should have trusted the guy who played well enough for you in the preseason to deserve maybe the first opportunity to carry the football, because that was happening in the first half when the game wasn't out of hand at that point. The Saints weren't playing from behind, and that was a very big moment that made it pretty clear that the Saints were going to have to pull off a miracle, which they almost did, to come back.
Andrew, what did you see offensively?
Well, I think you feel good that you had a chance to potentially tie the game, even with the terrible defensive performance that you had. It's crazy to me to think that Drew Brees is 39 years old. I mean, the way he went out and played, it's surgical. He just has not only just such a swagger about him, but he's just so talented. And it's crazy the duration that he's been able to do this in the NFL. And I thought he made some plays with his feet to be able to extend different plays.
He did.
And Mike Thomas, I think he's right on track to really becoming a household name nationwide. I remember I've told you on the radio before, I think, look, he's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He has records for how many catches he had over his first 2 seasons in the NFL, but he's just a man amongst boys out there whenever he's a wide receiver, playing wide receiver. That fumble obviously hurt, but the interesting thing that I think you saw too, Alvin Kamara I think is going to be continually used more as a receiver for the Saints. And I don't expect that just to last over these first 4 weeks. He's just a guy that I think they find you get him with momentum already and you put the ball in his hands and he's in space. He's just a slippery player who's just electric to watch.
Yes.
And it was interesting to see his interview too this week during locker room after the Bucs game. This was a couple of days later. This was on Wednesday, I believe.
Yes.
But he says he feels faster on the field. He feels stronger on the field. And he looked that way, especially to those fantasy owners, I'm sure, too, that had a great day for him, yeah.
Well, wasn't he pulling pickup trucks in the off-season?
Yeah, he was. I think so. I mean,
something
they
like that.
They got all kinds of crazy workouts these days.
Guys, my director, William Hill, and I were talking about this before the show, and I'd like to pose this question to y'all. With the changes we're seeing in the NFL right now in terms of protecting quarterbacks, it's not out of the realm of possibility of seeing Drew Brees still play at a high level for maybe 3 to 4, maybe 5 more years when you're talking about, you can't touch the quarterback now. And as long as his talents are not disintegrating in terms of the ability to be able to throw the football with accuracy, the ability to throw the football with zip, getting the ball where it needs to be, mentally he's got the game down. How long can this guy play under the new rules that we have in the NFL now, Andrew?
That's a great question. It's a great question. Look, I think when it comes to his contract, the 2 years that they set up with an option for the second year, obviously it made sense for both sides and both parties in case he were to, all of a sudden fall off a cliff this year. How long can he go? I don't know. If he keeps playing like this, I don't see any reason why he couldn't go to
his skill set
41
is not
or 42
disintegrated at all.
No. The interesting thing is that with guys like Peyton Manning or Brett Favre, it was all of a sudden you would see them playing at this high level and there was no degeneration. Like they woke up and it was like they weren't the same player. So that's what I'm interested to see when it comes to somebody like Brady or Breeze. But look, he's playing at the caliber that I think is near the top in the NFL. And I think the interesting thing to see too is that with some of these rules, whether it comes to quarterbacks or even wide receivers, I think you've seen more money thrown their way and more guaranteed money because offensively, these rules favor the offense and they protect the offense. And there hasn't, it's pretty unprecedented, the money that's not only been tossed out to these quarterbacks, but wide receivers. They know that some of these safeties and linebackers can't have the same hits over the middle. And of course, you can't come in crash down in the pocket and hit these quarterbacks the way that you used to be able to when you saw Lawrence Taylor taking people's heads off. That's just not allowed anymore. So the duration of these careers, I think, is going to extend, but I think you're also going to see more points scored by some of these offenses in the NFL. I think the scoring average is going to be up this year because the rule favors offenses.
Yeah, they want shootouts. Your thoughts on Breeze, just based on what we're seeing now and the way the rules are?
Modern training, modern supplements, just desire to work hard enough year-round in order to stay at that level. He has it, and there's no question that if he can avoid that one big hit, he could play till he's about 45 years old and be a good NFL quarterback, maybe even a great one. And I think the same is true for Tom Brady. You can't run around like Aaron Rodgers does and try to extend plays when you put yourself in danger and expect not to get hurt. These guys don't do that, and they're maestros. They're masters of the game. They know where they're going with the football. But when they're done with their drop, they're getting rid of it most of the time, and that will keep you upright and healthy, especially because of the rules that we're talking about. There's a reason to think that the Saints can keep moving forward with Breeze and be the centerpiece of an offense that now does have these young superstars like Mike Thomas, who they're going to have to pay a lot of money in a couple years, but he's not expensive for a couple more. Alvin Kamara for at least 3 more years. You're going to have those weapons. We might see a lot of Traquan Smith, a rookie that people are excited about because Ted Ginn's banged up coming up against the Browns. So when you have weapons to work with, and we hope about the health of the offensive line again, but a pretty young overall outside of the center offensive line to move forward with that's very talented and one of the best in the league. Why can't you think Drew Brees won't be playing in another 5 years?
Andrew, how do you feel about this weekend? Is it one that you just throw out the window and say, bad game, or is this something that you really got to take a look at and from this point forward kind of dissect what's going to be happening? Or are you still all in on the Saints, or is it kind of like one of these things where, well, maybe I need to kind of wait and see because the way the defense played on Sunday?
I still think this Saints team has the ability to go to the Super Bowl. I mean, I'm not going to change my opinion of this team just based on 1 week. I think that's an overreaction.
Yes.
You do have to weigh, though, that the defense didn't play well. The thing that you lean on is that, look, over the first 2 weeks last year, they didn't play well against Minnesota and New England, and all of a sudden they turned it around in Carolina and went on this 8-game win streak and ended up winning 11 games and, were 1 play away from going to the NFC Championship. Everybody knows that story. But, look, at the end of the day, I think you don't need to freak out over this 1 game. But, look, don't sleep on this Cleveland team.
No.
I mean, when you look at their offense, they have a lot of talent, a lot of talent. Probably the weak link is their quarterback, Tyrod Taylor. When you look at his numbers last week, I think he was 16 for 40. He was like a 51 quarterback rating, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. This guy's not going to challenge you that much in the air, although he does have uber talented receivers to be able to throw to. The one thing they can't let him do is beat him on the ground.
Yes.
They can't let what happened with Ryan Fitzpatrick happen again this week. Extending plays. But when you look at someone like Jarvis Landry, he's not just one of the best slot receivers, if not the best in the NFL. He's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And people know that going back to LSU. Right. I mean, the guy has just gotten progressively better.
And he's physical.
He can block with the best of them. That's what makes him so talented. And then Josh Gordon, if he gets everything together off the field, he's league-wide known as a talent that could be one of the best in the NFL. I mean, similar to someone like Mike Thomas. So I think they're going to get a real challenge from this Cleveland Browns team, both offensively and defensively. You saw last week Myles Garrett, who was the former #1 pick out of Texas A&M, he had 2 sacks. Another Ohio State product, who they took at #4, the cornerback, Denzel Ward, he had 2 interceptions. He was guarding Antonio Brown last week. And he had like 3 pass deflections, too, on top of it, from one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, Ben Roethlisberger. So this team is talented that's coming in. I really think, I don't know if they make the playoffs this year, but I think Cleveland has a chance to win 6, maybe even 7 games potentially. I mean, I think this is a really talented team. So as far as the Saints are concerned, you don't need to hit the panic button just yet. This is a game that you can toss out the window if you want to. You don't need an overreaction, but you do need to see a bounce back this week over the first really 4, maybe 5 games, because once you get into the meat of this schedule, you're talking about games against Dallas, Pittsburgh, the Eagles, Cincinnati's on the list too. I mean, you have a really tough schedule in the meat, so you got to take advantage of these first few games.
Your division games as well.
And division, yep.
Yeah, there's no looking forward like I think the Saints were past these first 2 games. Now I'm sure they have a laser focus on Cleveland. If the Saints play a solid game in the Dome, they're going to win the football game. We'll give Taylor a little credit for having to deal with the conditions and not turning over the ball, but see Cleveland against Ben Roethlisberger and company, those interceptions, they forced 6 turnovers. They should have won forcing 6 turnovers and only turning it over 1 time. But Cleveland will come in and try to rely on some playmakers on defense, win the time of possession, and be physical. But it's really the next 3 games in total that are going to tell us where the Saints are at, because week 3 you go to Atlanta. Atlanta lost Keanu Neal and Debo Jones.
Yes.
So that defense isn't going to be quite as fast or imposing. The Saints matched up really well against Atlanta last year, should have beaten them twice. That's a game the Saints should make up for Tampa by going on the road and winning. And then a tougher than it looked going into the season game against the New York Giants. Saquon Barkley is for real. If Eli Manning plays well, he has the weapons with Odell Beckham and company, a better defense. Coaching change was big for them. If Manning makes a couple throws, they beat Jacksonville, one of the most talented teams in the league, week 1. So the next 3 are going to tell us a lot. You'd really like to see the Saints step up and make up for it and win 3 straight, but until you see the defense play far better, you can't assume anything, even against the Browns.
And you got Greg Williams coming in this weekend.
Yeah.
And we know again, Peyton versus Williams, how, what happened last year. We know the Bounty Gate. And we also know how we know from him being the defensive coordinator here in New Orleans, the type of style he's going to play. He's coming after Drew Brees.
Right, and we talked about keeping a quarterback safe in the current rules. Greg Williams isn't going to care about a personal foul or 2. So Sean Payton may rue the day that he decided to run up the score the last time that he met up with Greg Williams, because now Williams has a speedy defense that can't just line up and play straight. He's the perfect defensive coordinator for that bunch up front outside of Myles Garrett. They're going to have to blitz to apply pressure. And remember me shots are coming for Drew Brees. And then you look at and you worry about Andrus Peat not being healthy. Guess what? Teron Armstead's on the injury report again. So this could be a major concern and going in against a defense and a defensive coordinator who were intent upon sending messages to not only the quarterback but the head coach. That makes this even more tricky.
And a defensive coordinator that knows the Saints offense because he was here.
Sure, and that's why you want this offensive line hopefully to be as healthy as it can coming in this week. And I think also you saw last week, Austin Carr took a lot of snaps, much more than I was expecting.
Me too.
So hopefully Cameron Meredith, who's on the mend, that's somebody who coming into this season I was really excited about, and I still am excited about once he's able to get some snaps. I think to see what Drew Brees did last week with, limited pieces around him. I know you have Mike Thomas and Kamara, who are obviously very talented, but still, you're still missing some big offensive pieces like Andrus Peat and then Cameron Meredith, who, I think was going to be someone who was going to really help their third down problems last year. When they get those guys back, and hopefully they'll be on the mend this week, I think that's really going to help this offense take it even to another level, which had the potential to even score more than 40 points last week in regulation.
Let's hope they don't do that every week.
No.
Final word.
Right, you have to wonder about why Meredith didn't play and not necessarily assume that it was medical and recovery-based.
That's the excuse they gave.
Right, sure. But maybe it had more to do with the fact that at this point they haven't seen enough from him as a blocker. If a lot of your offense is predicated on getting the ball to Alvin Kamara in space, you need to be able to have slot receivers who do that job. And I think we're going to see Meredith, especially if Ted Ginn can't play, but I don't know if he's going to wind up playing early in the season that primary role unless the Saints are convinced that he's ready to be the guy he was in Chicago on an offense where he did have to block to be on the field and set himself up to be one of the better receivers in the slot in the league. So we'll see about that, but I don't worry about Sean Payton using his weapons properly. That's the least of the Saints' concerns right now. I think we can all agree.
That's what kept Brandon Coleman on the field last week. Right. That's why he had so many snaps. He could block.
Yes, no doubt. Andrew Doak of Channel 4 Television, also Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com are our guest. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Quick word from our underwriters. We'll be right back.
Air conditioning, heating, and refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhardt has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhardt's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhardt's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhardt's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Here we go. Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com and Andrew Doak of Channel 4 Sports are with us. Guys, let's go to LSU. 31-0 over Southeastern, 2-0 in the season, going to the Plains of Auburn. Some upset that they weren't as dominant as people thought they should have done against Southeastern. And, look, the type of yards that Southeastern put on them, come on. Offensive line is a huge question mark for this team still. And now you're going against one of the best defenses in the nation against Auburn. The question is, can they protect Burrow, and can they open up holes for the running game? Jude, you first.
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think LSU knows. I don't think Steve Ensminger calling the plays is 100% sure. So you're going to see an offense that's going to look a lot like we saw against Miami, where Joe Burrow is going to be calling a lot of the game at the line of scrimmage. He should be more comfortable doing that with added snaps as an LSU Tiger, playing regular season games, a couple under his belt, because he's going to need to. But there shouldn't have been an overreaction to something that I think should have been expected, a classic sandwich game, trap game situation. It's the biggest game ever for a lot of that Southeastern roster filled with Louisiana talent that wanted to show up big time, and they played hard. But LSU did dominate a lot of the first half, not as much as they should have. The Hail Mary at the end of the half to make it 24-0 made it a little better looking cosmetically than it really was. But then LSU shut down. And you start bad habits when you do that in game one and you have a big lead over Miami and you shut down and let them back in the game. You knew the Lions weren't going to get back back into the football game, but you saw LSU do that. They're going to have no chance to do that at Auburn. Now you wonder if they can put 60 minutes together, if they can keep themselves in the game to be able to put away a victory. Last year they were down 20-0. That was Danny Etling at the quarterback position, of course, but that was in Tiger Stadium. You fall behind a couple scores at Auburn, this team's not going to be able to come back. Eric, you said it, it's offensive line. Can they hold up? Sadiq Charles was out last week. There's no backup left tackle that's ready to play. Dare Rosenthal, a freshman, finally moved from the defensive side. He will be an all-conference level tackle. He's that good, but he's not ready to play right now. LSU has no backup there. Then at right tackle, the biggest worry amongst the starters, Austin Deculus, the sophomore, is probably moving back into that role because, unfortunately, Badara Traore can't play the tackle position. I think LSU's figured that out. Adrian Mays, who started against Miami's hurt. So these are huge questions against an Auburn team that's built around their defensive front. But this will be a game about quick hitters, a lot more RPOs, a lot more audibles at the line to try to get Nick Brossette those opportunities against defenders one-on-one. Through a couple weeks of the season, he has made people miss 14 tackles. That's the most amongst Power 5 schools so far this season. That's an impressive number because Miami was one of those two defenses you faced. I think Brossette can be productive. I think Burrow is going to have to hit the quick hitters in the passing game to keep Auburn's defense honest, and most importantly, quick hitters mean you don't have to block as long.
Yes. Your thoughts on you can look back if you want on Southeastern, but your thoughts on this game with Auburn?
Well, you're going to face one of the best front sevens in Auburn's defense in the entire college football realm.
And you'll be there reporting.
And I'll be there reporting on it. But look, I think when it comes to LSU's offense last week, I understand the overreaction because I was kind of mulling that over whenever I was leaving, and I was trying to weigh the different options between how vanilla Steve Ensminger wanted to be and how little they had to show against Miami because defensively they were able to set themselves up for a lot of points where once they got the lead, they didn't have to show much offensively, and Brossette took over. So the interesting part is that I would like to see some more creativity from the LSU offense. One reason is because Joe Burrow either held on to the ball a little bit too long in instances, and he took some shots that he didn't need to whenever it came to running down the field whenever he was trying to pick up first downs. Now, he said pretty adamantly after the game, I'm not going to slide, I'm not a slider. It was almost like he was afraid they were going to question his toughness. He kind of changed his tune a little bit once Ed Ogeron had talked to him. But my point is that when it comes to Steve Ensminger's play calling on offense, he's not going to sacrifice the safety of his quarterback to be vanilla on offense and not show anything. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
You're not going to put the guy who's going to be your all-star QB in danger's way. That is a big, big question mark going into this game. How much did they miss Sadiq Charles and having Austin Deculus at left tackle? Adrian McGee, who went out the week before against Miami. Then you have the suspension with Ed Ingram. So this offensive line is very much in flux. I think if you do set him up with some more quick passing RPO type throws, some release routes with the running backs or wheel routes, that's going to take a lot of pressure off of someone like Burrow and the offensive line, and it's going to take away those unnecessary shots from him that he took, back in the pocket and in the open field. That if you do that in SEC play against someone like Auburn or Alabama, it's not a question of toughness. You're just being smart. You're not going to make it through a full season if you don't go down or if you're taking those shots because the offensive line can't protect you. Hopefully, that's what I'm looking for more than anything this week. Can they protect Joe? And is Steve Ensminger putting both positions at quarterback and offensive line in positions to be successful by getting the ball out of his hands quickly? They need some Ryan Fitzpatrick speed getting the ball out for Burrow.
2.5 seconds.
Yeah,
right?
no doubt.
These excuses don't settle well with LSU fans, and it's not smart football, but I think Joe Burrow was taking his opponent lightly. He was holding the ball longer, trying to come up with the big play downfield. Southeastern was doing everything in their power to keep LSU from doing that, and Burrow paid the price a couple of times. But Charlie Baglio, the director of football ops for a long time at LSU, came to the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation Quarterback Club this week. Somebody asked a question about Burrow not sliding. He says, is that going to be taken care of? And Charlie looked at his watch and said, that's being taken care of right now. It was on a Tuesday. So we're not going to see that against Auburn because if they lose Joe Burrow, they lose any chance of winning the game. No offense to Miles Brennan.
Right. Guys, one thing I'm concerned about is, especially against a team like Auburn, we'd like to see LSU open up the offense. We're waiting on that. Again, to me, it's like, okay, as you mentioned, got ahead of Miami early, probably didn't have to show anything. You weren't showing anything at Southeastern. If you're Ensminger, you want to hold all this in your hip pocket till you get into SEC play where it really counts. But are you able to open up this offense if ultimately you cannot protect the quarterback? Can you open up holes for Brissett to run through with this offensive line? You know, I don't think you can beat an SEC team by going max protect and having 2 wide receivers on a pattern. I don't think that's going to work in the SEC.
I don't think LSU is going to do that either. I think Ensminger understands that a lot of what we saw, people are already forgetting what we saw in the first couple of quarters against Miami before they shut things down. They were in the shotgun a lot. They were playing with pace sometimes, a little no huddle. Once they had momentum, a positive play to start a drive, they were back up on the line of scrimmage. So Burrow could try to take advantage of what the defense was showing them and to come up with quick hitters. And that big audible that changed that football game, the 50-yard touchdown run by Brissett, showed you a little bit of what LSU is going to try to do. They're going to try to catch defenses when they can go put a hat on a hat and give those offensive linemen a chance to go downfield. When people say that term, will LSU open up the offense? We're talking about them running the modern spread, and it is the modern spread, contrary to popular belief, that Ensminger's trying to run. There's only so much they can do if you can't trust your offensive linemen, and you don't believe they're going to be able to block off of play action, 5, 7 step drops. This offensive line's not capable of doing that against the Auburns of the world and coming up against pretty much any other team left on the schedule. They're going to have to play fast. It's the offense that Burrow came from at Ohio State. You're seeing most of that without a lot of the zone read, but you will see some of that against Auburn too. You have to show a little of it to keep that defense honest. The key is to play with tempo. They're going to do that. If that's what opening up the offense means, I'm sure LSU fully understands that's what they're going to have to do when they have decent field position to start any drive against Auburn. If they have any chance to be able to play the possession game, the time of possession game, the field position game that you need to, so Jared Stidham isn't getting multiple opportunities to wear down an LSU defense in what's going to be a hot afternoon.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the spread of this game, that was something that surprised me too. 10.5 points was what I looked at in favor of Auburn before I came in. Historically, these games are really close games. Now, there's only been 2 road winners in this series in the last 17 tries. Both of those have been LSU wins. But look, I think when you look at this LSU defense, they're going to be able to keep them in the game no matter what. This is one of the best front sevens for LSU's defense that I've seen in the country and in quite some time. I mean, between Rashard Lawrence, the transfer from Texas Tech, Braden Fehoko, was a force early on in that Southeastern game. Then you also have Greedy Williams, who's following up another All-American year. Devin White in the middle. Christian Fulton looked pretty good in some instances last week too. So they're going to be able to hold over the LSU offense until they really get going. But you also have to take into account too, Steve Ensminger and Orgeron were promising 4 and 5 wide sets. So you don't have to completely make over your offense overnight, which I wouldn't expect they're having to do that anyway because they've been talking about running a spread offense. But you have guys, especially that are very young at the wide receiver group. These guys have run a spread offense in high school since maybe even before high school. I mean, they're used from 7-on-7 and just all these offenses that you see at the high school level. Someone like Jamar Chase, he knows what he's doing in a spread offense. Jonathan Giles at Texas Tech, he was another Tech transfer. He knows what he's doing in a spread offense with what they run offensively in Lubbock. So this is just quick game passing to get the ball out quickly and to be able to alleviate pressure from Burrow taking hits and from the offensive line for having to block people for more than a few seconds. All you need to ask them to do is, hey, just don't let them bull rush. Like, let's just spread the field out and be able to get the ball to these athletes. That's what you're trying to do in the spread offense. That's what they've got to be able to do against Auburn. And you've seen people throughout the SEC, whether it's at Ole Miss or even Auburn in certain years under Cam Newton and even what they're transitioning to with Jarrett Stidham. These guys have all played in spread offenses, and this has started to grow throughout college football. This isn't something that should be too difficult. You've got to find a way to be able to take pressure off them.
Andrew, not much of a test last week with Chasson out and playing Southeastern. There will be a test this week against Auburn. How do you think they approach this? Will it be by committee? Will they settle on one player? What do you think happens there?
Losing Chase on, I think that was a big loss. That was a big loss. I mean, I know the expectations that they had for him as well to be, similar to somebody like Arden Key, when he was at his best at LSU and healthy and on the field. I'm not really sure what the answer is going to be on the edge for them. I think they're just going to have to run a lot of different guys and try to mix their pressures and try to be able to make Jarrett Stidham as uncomfortable as they possibly can. But I know on that interior of the defensive line, And even outside sometimes with Rashard Lawrence, I mean, those guys are they're forces out there, and they can move some bodies. Look, Dave Aranda is as good of a defensive coordinator as anybody, and he's going to be in the lab, trying to figure out something to be able to get those guys in positions to be able to make Jarrett Stidham uncomfortable. And he's just going to have to try everything he can.
Yep, no doubt.
Stidham's a better quarterback now than when they made him very uncomfortable last year in Baton Rouge. He had under 50% completion percentage, and he had a running game that I don't think is as good now. Kerryon Johnson's gone. His backup also gone to the NFL. So this is a different Auburn team and not the type of offense that Gus Malzahn would like. He does run a creative spread. He wants to play with the no huddle at pace. But at the same time, it's really been built on the running game. Stidham's mobile. I think that push from a very good group, as you mentioned, of tackles and Lawrence at Ed Alexander and company. They want to push the pocket and they want to get in Stidham's face. You'd love to come up with sacks, strips, things like that. But if you can just get in Stidham's face and throw off the timing, and if LSU winds up not having to respect the running game, then yeah, that 10-point spread looks huge, because this could be a game where if either team gets to 20, they're going to win it. That's sort of what I expect. And I think the disrespect going to LSU is even more unfair when you look at two key numbers and when you look at the total package of this football team. Since the Troy debacle last year, LSU's protected the ball better than any team in the country, and they haven't turned it over yet, knock on wood, so far this season. And unlike last season, now this looks like a club with Cole Tracy as a kicker, Zach Von Rosenberg the punter, great coverage units, and I think Jonathan Giles is a real danger threat as a return man. LSU could win the special teams battle in this game easily. That means field position. That could mean the explosive plays like DJ Chark had last year. Of course, he's in the NFL now, but a punt return for a touchdown. LSU can win this football game as long as Joe Burrow in that passing game can be more efficient, and that's going to mean completing more than 50% of his passes and giving the Jamar Chases, Jonathan Giles of the world, and Justin Jefferson, who's been outstanding as a guy out of Destrehan that they signed sort of last minute. He may be their best receiver right now.
Yeah, he sure would. Andrew, I'll take you first, and then Jude, what do you think happens on Saturday on the Plains?
I think they keep it close. I think they cover the spread. I like Auburn in this one. It's just tough to go down to Jordan-Hare and win down there. I like Auburn to win somewhere in the neighborhood of 24-21 in favor of the Auburn Tigers.
Ugly. I think it's going to be lower scoring than that. I think field goals are going to be the norm of the day, and LSU will fall short. But that 10-point spread is just massive and ridiculous the way these two teams match up. I'll give you something.
So you're telling me I need to run to Mississippi right now?
I'm not telling you that because I like you and I know you like your money. 19-13, Auburn wins it.
There you go. Let's head to the phone lines. 866-3200. Greg is in Houma. Greg, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Greg.
Hey, guys. I just got a question. Can somebody please help me understand what the Saints are doing with the linebackers? Like that game Sunday, I didn't hear nothing about Davis or Klein. And what are they planning on doing in the future with the linebackers? I'll hang up and listen.
Jude?
It was a mystery the whole preseason, and they've carried it over into the regular season. Are guys playing out of position all over the place or what? It sure looks like it. Dennis Allen wants to get the best players on the field, but I don't know if it works. I think Demario Davis is a natural inside linebacker, and he's being moved around to accommodate Alex Anzalone. They like him in the middle, and I know why, because it's a passing league, and he's a better athlete when you talk about the coverage responsibilities, but I think he's much more comfortable just using his athleticism and playing outside.
In the middle anyway.
Right, you do, and you've got too many of those. A.J. Klein's not a strong side linebacker, and they don't have a true strong side linebacker on the roster. So this team, you worry about them, and Cleveland's going to ask those questions. Can three linebackers go on the field and succeed? Everybody's out of sorts, and a lot of Saints fans were answering this question. How long will it take if that group struggles to get Craig Robertson on the field? He's the most underappreciated Saint on the roster by far, and he's solid. He doesn't make mistakes, and if we keep seeing these mistakes, I think you will see Robertson out there.
You were at practice every day. There was always a conversation about the linebackers being interchangeable, etc. Your thoughts?
Well, you saw last year they run a lot of nickel. So what that means most of the time is that they're only going to have two linebackers on the field. Now, the two that you saw most this game were Demario Davis, who played all 66 defensive snaps, and then Alex Anzalone was right behind him. I'm with you, Jude. I think Demario likes playing Will because he gets to use his athleticism. I remember asking him one time, when you're playing Will, do you feel almost a little bit more freed up, like you're just able to let it loose because you're not worried about playing Mike and you're basically the quarterback of the defense if you're playing Mike. You're making sure everybody's lined up in the right spot, which Lord knows they probably had a lot of that last week with all the different communication issues. But look, I think right now it's going to be in flux, and it's going to change all the time, I think is the best answer. And I know that really doesn't bring too much clarity, but even in the locker room this week, Manti Te'o he was usually the linebacker that was taken off the field whenever they went into nickel.
Yes.
But by the end of the game, he was actually rotating in that nickel set. And when he was asked in the locker room if he expected to play in nickel, he said no. But I just rolled with it because that's what Dennis Allen and them were trying to, and Sean Payton as well, were trying to mix things up as the game was going along. Because, look, you were grabbing at straws by the end of that game trying to figure out something defensively. I think when it comes to the linebacker group, it's just going to be a spinning wheel. I think Demario Davis is going to be the constant in that group. But outside of him, I don't know if I really have a concrete answer for you.
And this is the same coaching staff that didn't get it right personnel-wise early last year either. Remember Devontae Harris? Yes, all Saints fans do. So it may take some time for them to figure out what they have to do versus the stubbornness early on about what they would like to work. If they're winning these first two games as expected at home easily, then they can get away with some growing pains. But they've lost to Tampa, and you run out of time in the NFC if you want to be a contender. You can't afford to drop games in September trying to be better for December and January.
No doubt. Let's go to Tom in Metairie. Tom, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Tom.
Hey, guys. I want to make a couple of comments and a couple of questions. So the defense got punched in the mouth, and then they really didn't have a leader on defense to rally them. I want to see who you think maybe the leader of defense could be. And then I was a little concerned about Sean Payton's demeanor during the game and even the press conference after the game. He was talking about how they played, but they also missed on a two-point conversion. They wasted the timeout to get the two-point conversion. So I think that's on him as well. So I just want to see what you guys say. I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
Goes back to Demario Davis. You pay big money in the offseason for a thumper of a middle linebacker who's a great athlete, who's come into his own and was dominant last year in the middle of a defense for the Jets. A lot of times your middle linebacker in a perfect scenario is the leader of a defense.
Cam Jordan is the leader on this defense.
Right,
now,
and there's no question that Jordan is, but he emotionally he's going to get his teammates fired up, but he leads by example and he battles in the trenches. Leaders tend to come, those vocal leaders who direct traffic, who when mistakes happen, clean things up quickly amongst teammates before the coaches can even do it, tend to be guys in the middle of the defense at linebacker and usually safeties defensively. But Marcus Williams,
that's why Coleman was brought in.
Right, and Coleman is new and somebody who's coming off a bad season and still trying to find his way in a new scheme. So I just don't know if there are that many vocal leaders. I think that bonk game stuff, they've been worried too much about posing for pictures and not enough about the task at hand, because last year was a surprise that for a while there came a little bit too easily for them before the injuries. They felt like they could have won it all. They know they're good enough, but they have to understand, as much as they argued that they were a mature football team now, there was a lot of immaturity, particularly on defense, what we saw against Tampa Bay.
I think Cam Jordan is the leader of this defense. I was surprised to just see him neutralized, and I think Tampa Bay just had an unbelievable game plan for him to really be able to take him out of that game because he did not have much impact. But look, I think you did bring veterans into this defense like a Demario Davis or a Kurt Coleman, like you just mentioned, for their leadership in moments like this. And look, this is where the donuts are made. I mean, in a week like this where you're coming off a loss, this is where leadership really shows up. Again, I don't have too much of an overreaction as far as the defense. I know it went down in flames this week, but let's see what they do against Cleveland. When it comes to Sean Payton, though, look, I think it's fair to say he got out-coached by Dirk Cutter.
There's no doubt about it.
And look,
well as Dennis Allen.
As well as Dennis Allen. The blame goes all around with the Saints coaching staff. They didn't have these guys prepared going into week one, whether it was big heads, whether it was just lack of preparation. I don't know. It's probably across the board. But Dirk Cutter's lame duck coach. I mean, just to be honest with you, last year there were a lot of expectations for that Tampa Bay Bucs team as a dark horse Super Bowl contender potentially. They didn't live up to those expectations, and Dirk Cutter's been on the hot seat ever since that season. So, look, I think Sean Payton addressed it in the postgame too. He said it starts with me. We didn't prepare the guys like we needed to. They didn't make adjustments in game. We'll see if they have a better performance this week, though.
And if he gets out-coached by Hugh Jackson this week, then we know we have problems.
That's exactly right. Ryan is in Mid-City. Ryan, welcome. Hey, Ryan.
Yeah, how you doing, yo? I got a question and a statement. Sure. I think, far as on LSU, I'm going to go with them first. I think they'll underestimate the in-state rap, the in-state play. I think people are playing, they're playing against their brothers, their fathers, their mothers, so they're going to give LSU the best. And I think, you know what I'm saying? So that's what I think about it. I think LSU is fantastic. I think they got to play physical. I think we have to get LSU have to get a bigger running back. You know what I'm saying? As far as the Saints, y'all hit everything on them. I mean, they just was out physical. They was out physical. I think the Saints they got to take one game at a time. The Saints cannot afford to look forward. You know, and LSU. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Let's go to Bernard in Covington. Bernard, welcome. Hey, Bernard. Bernard, are you with us?
Guys, I want to say I'm enjoying your show.
Thank you, sir.
But what I wanted to say originally, I wanted to give kudos to Ogeron for not swamping Southeastern. He had a lot of respect for him, and he beat him just well enough, and they hung in there. Many of you might know that he went there and spoke to those kids, so they're familiar with him. And I think that was kudos for him. So, but as far as the Saints go, Jude's right. We need a dominating linebacking core, and not since the Dome Patrol have we really been able to crystallize that. I thought Klein was going to be the leader, and Anzalone, I like him, but I'm really concerned, and I'll hang up. And we didn't.
Okay, I think we lost Bernard, guys.
Well, I mean, the Dome Patrol is maybe the best linebacking core in history. NFL Network. So let's throw the Dome Patrol out. But yeah, they signed A.J. Klein to a big contract. It clearly hasn't worked out for what they were expecting. Now it's Demario Davis that needs to step in and step up and be better. And the coaches need to put him in that position, like we were talking about, to be the best he can be.
Anything in that?
I think Klein has basically become your run stuffer, but he's not great in coverage, and so he's kind of gotten lost in that mix. He's not very versatile. I think he's the least versatile.
They got two guys like that, then Teo and Klein, that are kind of one-dimensional.
I would agree. I think Teo has a little bit more athleticism to him, but yeah, still, I mean, that's the reason why they're not going to see as many snaps as someone like Demario Davis or Anzalone, especially if they're going to be running a lot of nickel packages. I think it was almost 70% of the time last year they were running nickel, so that's what's going to keep those guys on the field.
Yeah. Joe is in Covington. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Eric. Great show, you guys. I want to ask one question about LSU, and then I'm going to ask another one about the Saints.
Sure.
As far as Joe Burrow is concerned, I mean, we're all kind of worried about, what he was doing. I mean, it was just ridiculous the way he wasn't sliding. Do you think Ogeron could possibly get together with Maneri and kind of work on some sort of a sliding program?
They better work on some kind of slide with him, because he won't be around much longer in the SEC if he's going to be trying to take on linebackers or defensive end. But I'm sure they're working on it right now, as you mentioned at the quarterback club. What was said.
Burrow needs to pick and choose those spots in crucial situations. Right. Clearly, he wasn't taking Southeastern as seriously as he should have. Let's put it that way.
Right. And your question or comment about the Saints?
And also, why did we get rid of Stupar?
I don't know. It's mind-boggling. Great special teams player. Every time he's been on the field as a linebacker, he's produced. I have no clue. Guys? Thank you, Joe.
It's a good question. One thing that was very interesting as well when it came to the kickoff return unit, you didn't see any big guys on the field, and that included some linebackers. Mm-hmm. I mean, you really saw skill position type guys. Tight end was probably the biggest guys that I saw on the field, and I think that's kind of changed the game a little bit on how they're approaching special teams right now. And so, look, Stupar was a great player for the Saints, and obviously I think he's going to be missed because he brought a lot of different facets and categories that don't necessarily show up in the box score. Right. But I think sometimes it's just a numbers game.
Smaller, quicker players on core special teams because of the way kickoffs are now situated. Guys have to be fast to run back from set positions in order to block. So those thumpers, those linebackers like Stupar, along with playing 70% nickel, they don't have a place on rosters anymore.
Yeah. Again, sorry to the calls we couldn't get to. We'll try to get to you guys next week. We're out of time. Thanks to Andrew Doak of Channel 4 Television, also Jude Young, our great guest tonight. Also, again, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports Television, that's statewide 9 p.m. every Friday night. You catch me on the radio, Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2 on the iHeart Radio app. That's weekdays noon to 2. Also, ericasher.com is where you can listen to the podcast, download it at your leisure. Also, catch all the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to our underwriters who make this show possible. Also, the WLA production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Trey Lopez, Naila Jones, and my director, William Hill. For Andrew Doak and also Jude Young, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.